So let's look at this column of data here. As you can see, even if I have them all set to align to the left, they all look like they have the same amount of characters in it, but they're all over the place. And the reason is because some of these have spaces in them at unusual places, and that spaces are looked at as characters just like letters or numbers in this cell. And so the first thing you've got to do is you probably need to try and clean some of that up and remove some of those spaces. So one way to do that is with something called the trim function. And what the trim function is going to do is any spaces at the beginning, it's going to remove, and any spaces at the end, it's going to remove. But if there are spaces in the middle, it'll leave them alone. So, for example, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to put a space right there in the middle. Okay, put some there's spaces at the end, and there are spaces at the beginning. So if I say equal to trim this, what we get, if I flatten that down, with Control Copy and then Control Alt VV, which is paste, we now see that we kept the space in the middle, but we now no longer have any spaces at the beginning or end. So if I were to copy that down, I would run into that, and I would have a similar situation. So I've removed all of the text all of the spaces at the beginning and all of the spaces at the end. Another way to perform something similar is to use what's called a substitution function. So for example, if I said substitute, and the text referring to here is this whole cell, what's the old text that I want to remove? In this case, I'm going to say open quotes, space, and closed quotes. And I want to replace it with just open and closed quotes. And what that means is that this first one it's recognizing is, okay, there's a space here, but over here there's no space. So anywhere there's an empty space, just close it up. And it's going to ask me as the last parameter, do you want it to just happen one time, or do you want it to happen every time there's a space? So in this case, I'm just going to leave it blank, which will default to removing every instance of having spaces. It's going to do the same thing. Now, why wouldn't I just use trim instead? If I didn't want to remove spaces, if I wanted to remove, for example, 183, then it's going to pull this 183 out instead of a space. Okay, you can see that. More importantly, what I can do is I can say, instead, I want to change, let's assume this is some type of sales record, and the first three letters are the initials of a sales representative. And we want to change it from DWE to a different sales rep JRB. So I would say substitute A2, and I'm going to replace DWE. And what I'm going to replace it with is JRB. So now anywhere this text DWE is in here will be replaced with JRB. Now you can simply copy that down. Now, you can see that DW was replaced with JRB, but we still have this problem over here of all these spaces. Well, we can combine these two functions together, right? So if you remember, you come over here, trim was just whatever you put in there, it's going to remove spaces at the beginning and at the end. So if I go to this very first function, let's just pretend I'm going to say trim, and I'm going to put all of that inside, right? So I put these spaces here just kind of so we can kind of see. So this entire thing is now going to have the spaces at the beginning and at the end removed. Okay, now we've removed all spaces from the beginning and the end, and we were able to substitute a certain piece of text for another one. So DWE for JRB. And then the last thing you do is my favorite shortcut is you could copy this if you didn't want to replace it. Control Alt V and then V again for values, and that is going to flatten down the results so that the formula has been removed, and what you're left with is just a hard copy of the result. So that's one way you can use trim and substitute to kind of break things apart.